the long road home. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the interstate in a shroud of darkness. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white under the faint light of the dashboard. Her friend, Lisa, sat in the passenger seat, eyes flicking nervously to the road signs. They had been driving for hours, the long stretch of highway seeming endless. A road trip to visit Sarah's family for the holidays had seemed like a good idea at the time, but now, in the inky blackness of the night, it felt like a grave mistake. "We should have taken the earlier exit," Lisa muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah glanced at her friend, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I know. But the GPS said this route would be faster." "Faster, maybe, but it feels like we're in the middle of nowhere," Lisa replied, her eyes scanning the dense woods that lined both sides of the road. The car's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating a narrow strip of asphalt ahead. The trees loomed tall and menacing, their branches swaying ominously in the wind. The radio was off, leaving only the sound of the tires on the road and the occasional rustle of leaves to fill the oppressive silence. Sarah's phone buzzed in the cup holder, the screen lighting up with a notification. She glanced at it briefly, catching the tail end of a news alert: mysterious disappearances reported along Highway 29. Lisa noticed Sarah's furrowed brow. "What's wrong?" "Just another news alert. Something about disappearances on this highway," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. Lisa's eyes widened. "Disappearances? That's just what we need to hear right now." "Relax. It's probably just a coincidence," Sarah said, though she didn't believe her own words. As the night wore on, the road seemed to stretch on endlessly, with no sign of civilization in sight. Sarah felt a growing unease in the pit of her stomach. She turned to Lisa. "Maybe we should find a place to pull over and rest for a bit. I'm starting to get tired." Lisa nodded, relief evident in her eyes. "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea." A few miles later, they spotted a dilapidated sign for a rest area. Sarah took the exit, the car bumping along the uneven pavement. The rest area was deserted, a small parking lot surrounded by a few picnic tables and a grimy restroom building. Sarah parked the car, and they both stepped out, stretching their stiff limbs. The air was cold and damp, a thick fog rolling in from the woods. Lisa shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "This place gives me the creeps." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Let's just take a quick break and get back on the road." They walked over to one of the picnic tables, sitting down on the weathered wood. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. Sarah glanced around nervously, the shadows playing tricks on her eyes. "Do you ever get the feeling that we're being watched?" Lisa asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. "Yeah, I do." Before Lisa could respond, a rustling sound came from the edge of the woods. They both froze, their eyes locked on the dark tree line. The rustling grew louder, closer, until a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, tall and gaunt, his clothes dirty and torn. His eyes glinted in the darkness, a wild look in them. "Help me," he croaked, stumbling towards them. Sarah and Lisa exchanged a panicked glance before rushing to the man's side. "What happened to you?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. The man grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "You have to get out of here. They're coming." "Who's coming?" Lisa demanded, her eyes wide with fear. The man's breath hitched, his eyes darting around the darkened rest area. "The shadows. They come for anyone who stops on this road. You have to leave now, before it's too late." Sarah and Lisa exchanged another glance, fear gripping their hearts. "Come with us," Sarah urged, trying to pull the man towards the car. He shook his head violently. "No, it's too late for me." "But you can still escape." "Oh." They didn't need to be told twice. Sarah and Lisa bolted back to the car, their hearts pounding in their chests. As Sarah fumbled with the keys, she saw the man collapse to the ground, his body convulsing. She didn't wait to see what happened next. She started the engine and sped out of the rest area, the tires screeching on the pavement. As they drove back onto the highway, Lisa glanced in the rearview mirror. "He's gone." Sarah didn't respond, her focus entirely on the road ahead. The fog had thickened, making it hard to see more than a few feet in front of the car. The headlights barely penetrated the dense mist, casting eerie shadows on the road. "We need to find another route," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "We can't stay on this highway." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. She kept an eye out for any sign that might lead them to safety. Minutes stretched into an eternity as they drove through the oppressive darkness. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the middle of the road. Sarah slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt. The figure stood motionless, its features obscured by the fog. Sarah squinted, trying to make out who, or what, it was. "It looks like the man from the rest area," Lisa whispered, her voice shaking. "But how?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We left him back there." The figure stepped closer, and Sarah's blood ran cold. It was indeed the man from the rest area, but something was different about him. His eyes, which had been wild with fear before, now glowed an unnatural shade of yellow. His movements were jerky, almost inhuman, as he approached the car. "We need to go," Lisa whispered urgently. "Now." Sarah didn't need any more prompting. She slammed her foot on the accelerator, the tires screeching as they sped away. The figure remained in the rearview mirror, standing in the middle of the road, watching them disappear into the fog. "What the hell is happening?" Lisa's voice cracked with fear. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. "But we need to get off this road." They drove in silence, the fog growing thicker with every mile. Sarah kept her eyes peeled for any exit signs, but the oppressive mist obscured everything beyond a few feet. The highway seemed to stretch on endlessly, with no sign of civilization. As they rounded a bend, the headlights caught a glimpse of a narrow dirt road branching off the highway. Sarah swerved onto it, hoping it would lead them to safety. The car bounced along the uneven path, the trees closing in on either side. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Lisa asked, her voice filled with doubt. "Do you want to go back?" Sarah shot back, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Lisa fell silent, her eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. The dirt road twisted and turned through the dense forest, the trees looming overhead like silent sentinels. The fog seemed to thicken, if that was even possible, swirling around them like a living entity. After what felt like an eternity, they saw a faint light up ahead. As they got closer, they realized it was coming from a small, isolated house nestled deep in the woods. The windows glowed with a warm, inviting light, a stark contrast to the cold darkness outside. "We should see if they can help us," Lisa suggested, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Sarah hesitated but nodded. They had no other options. She pulled up to the house and killed the engine. They stepped out of the car, the cold air biting at their skin. As they approached the front door, it creaked open, revealing an elderly woman standing in the doorway. "Hello, dears," the woman said, her voice soothing. "What brings you out here on a night like this?" Sarah and Lisa exchanged a wary glance before Sarah spoke. "We got lost on the highway and saw your light. Can we use your phone to call for help?" The woman smiled, her eyes twinkling at the corners. "Of course, come in." You must be freezing." They stepped inside, the warmth of the house enveloping them. The interior was cozy, filled with antique furniture and the faint scent of lavender. The woman led them to a small sitting room and gestured for them to sit. "Can I get you something to drink? Tea, perhaps?" she offered. Sarah and Lisa declined politely, their nerves too frayed to think about anything but getting help. "If we could just use your phone," Sarah began. The woman's smile faded slightly. "I'm afraid I don't have a phone. But you're welcome to stay here until the fog lifts." Sarah's heart sank. "No phone? Is there anywhere nearby where we could get help?" The woman shook her head. "I'm afraid not. These woods are quite isolated. But don't worry, you're safe here." Safe. The word seemed to hang in the air, mocking them. Sarah forced a smile, trying to hide her growing unease. "Thank you. We appreciate it." As the woman busied herself in the kitchen, Sarah and Lisa huddled together on the couch, their voices barely above a whisper. "Something's not right," Lisa said, her eyes darting around the room. "I know," Sarah replied. "But we don't have much choice. We'll stay here for a while and leave as soon as the fog clears." Hours passed, the night dragging on interminably. The woman had long since gone to bed, leaving Sarah and Lisa alone in the dimly lit sitting room. The house was eerily quiet, the silence broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards. Suddenly, a low whisper echoed through the room, sending a chill down Sarah's spine. She glanced at Lisa, who was wide-eyed with fear. "Did you hear that?" Lisa nodded, her face pale. "It came from upstairs." They crept towards the staircase, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, as they ascended the stairs. At the top, a narrow hallway stretched out before them, lined with closed doors. The whispering seemed to be coming from the last door on the left. They exchanged a fearful glance before moving towards it. As they reached the door, Sarah hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. "Are you sure about this?" Lisa whispered. Sarah took a deep breath and nodded. She turned the doorknob slowly, the door creaking open to reveal a small, dimly lit room. The whispering ceased abruptly, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. The room was empty, save for an old wooden chest in the corner. Sarah approached it cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. She knelt down and lifted the lid, revealing a collection of old photographs and trinkets. Lisa joined her, peering over her shoulder. "What is all this?" Sarah picked up a photograph, her eyes widening in shock. It was a picture of the man they had seen on the highway, looking much younger and happier. Beside him stood the elderly woman, a bright smile on her face. "This can't be," Sarah began, but her words were cut off by a sudden, bone-chilling scream from downstairs. They bolted to their feet, racing down the hallway and back down the stairs. The scream echoed through the house, coming from the sitting room. As they burst into the room, they saw the elderly woman standing by the window, her face twisted in terror. "They are here," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Sarah and Lisa followed her gaze to the window, where they saw dark figures moving through the fog. The shadows seemed to writhe and twist, their forms shifting and changing as they moved closer. "We have to get out of here," Sarah said, grabbing Lisa's hand. The woman shook her head. "It's too late. They found us." The shadows enveloped the house, the darkness pressing in on all sides. Sarah and Lisa backed away, their eyes locked on the windows as the figures drew closer. The air grew cold, the fog seeping into the house like a living entity. Suddenly, the front door burst open, and the shadows flooded in. Sarah and Lisa screamed, their voices lost in the cacophony of whispers and howls. The darkness swallowed them, the cold seeping into their bones. And then, just as suddenly, it was over. The fog lifted, the shadows dissipated, and the house fell silent once more. When Sarah and Lisa opened their eyes, they found themselves standing on the highway, their car parked a few feet away. The road was clear, the night calm and still. They exchanged a bewildered glance, their minds struggling to process what had just happened. "We need to get out of here," Lisa said, her voice trembling. Sarah nodded, and they hurried to the car. As they drove away, the events of the night seemed to fade, like a distant nightmare. But the fear lingered, a constant reminder of the horrors they had witnessed. They never spoke of that night again, but the memory haunted them, a dark shadow that followed them wherever they went. And though they tried to forget, the whispers always returned, echoing in the darkness, a chilling reminder of the long road home.